A human column of 1 million people crossing the desert. Children crying, elderly people staggering under the scorching sun, pregnant women carrying babies in their arms. But how did this crowd manage to get water every day? Food for 1 million mouths. And why did God condemn an entire generation to die walking? What happened in those 40 years in the desert goes far beyond what you imagine, and some truths are going to impact you. 600,000 men on foot, without counting women and children. Exodus 12:37. It is not talking about a family fleeing in the middle of the night. We are talking about more than 1 million people leaving Egypt at once, an entire nation on the move. For you to have an idea of the dimension, if this crowd walked in single file, the line would be more than 300 kilometers long. When the first ones reached the destination, the last ones would still be leaving Egypt. But they were not just Israelites. Exodus 12:38 mentions a great mixture of people who went out together. Egyptian, Nubian, Libyan, foreigners who decided to follow the God of Israel after seeing the 10 plagues. Imagine the confusion of language, different cultures and customs trying to survive together in the desert. How to organize this human mass? Moses did not invent anything. God himself gave the instructions in Numbers 2. Each tribe had its specific position around the tabernacle. Judah, Issachar and Zebulun camped to the east, Reuben, Simeon, and Gad to the south, and so on. Each tribe marched with its own flag. Numbers 2. 2 speaks of flags according to the insignias. They were not dirty rags waving in the wind. They were organized symbols, specific colors, and impressive military logistics for the time. When the time came to break camp, things worked like a clock. First, the Levites dismantled the tabernacle. Then the tribes of the east moved. Then those of the south carrying the sacred objects. Those of the west and north closed the rear. Such an operation today would require helicopters, GPS, radio communication. They did it only with trumpet signals and smoke during the day, fire during the night. But here comes the detail that no one tells. This organization did not happen overnight. It took time, mistakes, deaths. Many people did not withstand the pressure and died along the way even before reaching Sinai. And this was only the beginning, because surviving in the desert with 1 million people is not a matter of organization. It is a matter of a daily miracle. And those miracles were just beginning. 1 million people need water every day. Have you already thought about this? An adult needs at least 2 liters of water per day just not to die. Multiply by 1 million. They are 2 million liters daily in the Sinai desert, where it almost never rains and the wells are rare. 3 days after crossing the Red Sea, the water ran out. The people were desperate. Exodus 15:22 says they found water in Marah, but it was bitter, undrinkable. The people murmured against Moses. What shall we drink? There the first miracle of the water happened. God showed a tree to Moses. He threw the wood into the water, and it became sweet. Simple as that. A tree transformed toxic waters into drinking water for 1 million people. But the greater miracle came later in Rephidim, Exodus 17. 6 counts that Moses struck a rock with the staff and water gushed out. It was not a thin stream of water. It was enough to satisfy the thirst of all that crowd. Paul in 1 Corinthians 10:4 says that rock accompanied them during the whole journey. 40 years of fresh water gushing in the middle of the desert. Now let's talk about food. Exodus 16:4 records the promise of God. Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you. And it literally rained every morning, except Saturday. The ground was covered by a fine substance, similar to frost. The manna had a flavor of honey cake according to Exodus 16:31. Numbers 11:8 gives more details. The people ground it in mills, beat it in mortars, cooked it in pots, and made cakes. The flavor reminded of fresh oil. Each person could collect 1 omer per day, about 2 liters. Nothing of storing. If they kept it for the next day, it rotted and bred worms. Only on Friday the rule changed. Exodus 16:22 counts that on that day they collected double, 2 omers per person, and the manna from Friday lasted until Saturday without spoiling. It was the most efficient rationing system in history. But sometimes the people got fed up. Numbers 11:4 records that they complained. Who will give us meat to eat? Nostalgia for the food of Egypt. Fish, cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, garlic. God's response was dramatic. He sent quails, not some quails. Numbers 11:31 says that the wind brought quails from the sea, and they fell around the camp. At a height of 2 cubits, almost 1 meter high, of birds covering the ground. The people went out collecting quails for a whole day and night. Whoever collected the least took 10 homers, about 22 liters of meat. Some collected much more. But while they were still chewing the meat, God sent a plague that killed the greedy. It was water, bread, and free meat in the desert. But it had rules, and whoever did not respect the rules died, because in the desert there was no space for rebels. And speaking of rebels, wait until you find out what the women did while the men complained about the food. Red Sea. While the men were still processing what had happened, Miriam led all the women in an epic celebration, tambourines, dances, songs of victory. She was not just the sister of Moses. She was a prophetess, a leader in her own right. Micah 6:4 places Miriam beside Moses and Aaron as one of the 3 people God sent to bring Israel out of Egypt. But leadership in the desert had a high price. Numbers 12 tells that Miriam and Aaron criticized Moses for having married a Cushite woman. It seemed like a silly family gossip. But behind it was an attempted coup. Has the Lord spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us also? God's response was immediate and brutal. Miriam became leprous instantly, white as snow. Aaron, who also criticized, was not touched. Only she. Moses interceded for his sister, but God said she would stay outside the camp for 7 days, a devastating public humiliation. Most impressively, Numbers 12:15 says that all the people waited. More than 1 million people stopped the journey because of one woman. This shows the respect and influence that Miriam had. Decades later, other women would make history in the desert. The 5 daughters of Zelophehad, Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. Numbers 27. One counts that they presented themselves before Moses, before the priest Eleazar, before the princes, and before all the congregation. Their case was simple. The father died in the desert without leaving male children. By the law of the time, the inheritance would be lost. But they argued, "Why should the name of our father be removed from among his family? Because he had no son. Give us a possession among the brothers of our father." It was a legal revolution, women claiming inheritance rights in a patriarchal society. Moses did not know what to do and consulted God. The response came in Numbers 27:7. The daughters of Zelophehad speak correctly. You shall give them a possession of inheritance among the brothers of their father. They won and more. God created a new law for similar cases in the future. But the life of the women in the desert was not only leadership and legal conquests, it was also practical survival. Exodus 16:16 shows that each one should collect manna according to what each one can eat. The women organized the collection for their families, ground the manna, cooked, took care of the children, and when babies were born in the desert, how did they do deliveries without hospitals, without anesthesia, without medical structure? The Bible does not give details, but the fact is that the population grew during the 40 years. Children were born, grew up, and became adults walking through the desert. The women also participated in the religious rituals. Exodus 38:8 mentions that they donated their bronze mirrors to make the basin of the tabernacle, a significant personal sacrifice in a time without cosmetic stores. But not everything was flowers. Some women were involved in the worst scandals of the desert, and those scandals almost destroyed the entire nation. Because when 1 million people live together for 40 years, organization and laws need to be more rigid than any army. Moses was at the limit of exhaustion. Exodus 18:13 paints the picture. From morning until afternoon, an immense line of people waiting to speak with him, neighbor fights, commercial disputes, inheritance questions, cases of marital betrayal. More than 1 million people and just one judge to resolve everything. Jethro, father-in-law of Moses, saw that madness and said the obvious. What you are doing is not good. You will surely wear away, both you and this people who are with you. His solution was brilliant, and it is recorded in Exodus 18:21. Choose men of virtue, God-fearing, men of truth, who hate greed. Place them over the people as chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of 50, and of 10. It was a pyramid of military command adapted for civil justice. Each group of 10 families had a leader. Each 5 leaders of 10 responded to a chief of 50. 2 chiefs of 50 responded to a chief of 100. 10 chiefs of 100 responded to a chief of 1,000. Simple cases were resolved at the lower levels. Complex disputes went up in the hierarchy. Only the impossible cases reached Moses. A system that worked for 40 years in the desert and influenced legal systems until today. But who were these judges? Deuteronomy 1:15 says that Moses chose wise and understanding men. They were not elected politicians or hereditary nobles. They were people recognized by the community as just and capable. The military organization followed the same structure. Numbers 31 mentions captains of thousands and captains of hundreds. When Israel needed to go to war, the civil chiefs became military commanders automatically. It was an army nation in constant motion. The Levites had a special role in this system. Numbers 3:6 says that they were given to Aaron to help in the service of the tabernacle. But they were not just priests. They were also the religious police of Israel. Deuteronomy 17:9 establishes that cases involving homicide, rights, or wounds should be brought to the Levite priests and to the judge who would be in those days. They had authority to judge serious crimes and ritual questions. When someone committed sacrilege or blasphemy, it was the Levites who executed the sentence. Exodus 32:26-28 shows this clearly. After the episode of the golden calf, Moses summoned the Levites and said, "Each one kill his brother and his companion and his relative." They killed about 3,000 men that day. It was fast and fatal justice, without resources, without appeals, without prisons to serve time. In the desert, serious crimes resulted in immediate death or expulsion from the camp, which amounted to the same thing. Leviticus 24:14 records the protocol for executions. "Take the blasphemer outside the camp, and let all who heard him lay their hands on his head, and let all the congregation stone him." It was mandatory collective participation. No one could say later that they did not know or that they did not agree. The whole community had to assume responsibility for the execution. But some crimes were so serious that even stoning was not enough, and the punishments that would come next would make even the Levites tremble with fear. If you believe that God still governs with justice today, comment, "The Lord's justice is perfect." The earth opened and swallowed 250 men alive. Numbers 16. Records the most terrifying rebellion of the 40 years in the desert. Korah, a Levite of the family of Kohath, joined Dathan and Abiram from the tribe of Reuben to challenge the authority of Moses and Aaron. It was not a political fight. It was an attempted religious coup. Korah gathered 250 princes of the congregation, men of renown, and said, "You take too much upon you, for all the congregation, all of them are holy, and the Lord is among them. Why then do you lift yourselves above the congregation of the Lord?" It seemed democratic. It seemed fair, but God saw it as blasphemy. Moses proposed a test. The next day, each one would take his censer, put fire and incense, and present himself before the Lord. Whomever God chose would be the Holy One. On the next morning, the unthinkable happened. Numbers 16, 31 to 32 describes the scene, and the ground that was under them split. The earth opened its mouth and swallowed them, their houses, all the men of Korah, and all their goods alive. They went down alive into the pit. Dathan, Abiram, their wives, small children, babies, the whole family. The earth closed over them, and they disappeared forever. But the punishment did not stop there. The 250 men who offered incense were burned alive by fire that came out from the presence of the Lord. Numbers 16, 35 leaves, no doubt. And fire came out from the Lord and consumed the 250 men who offered the incense. The next day, the people had the audacity to complain, "You have killed the people of the Lord." God's response was a plague that killed another 14,700 people. It only stopped when Aaron ran through the middle of the camp with incense, making atonement between the living and the dead. But not every punishment was so dramatic. Numbers 15, 32 to 36 tells the case of the man who collected wood on Saturday. It seems like a minor crime. Right, wrong. They brought him before Moses, Aaron, and the whole congregation. They were in doubt about what the punishment should be. God replied, "That man shall surely be put to death. Let all the congregation stone him outside the camp." The first execution for violation of the Sabbath, the whole congregation had to participate. Each person threw a stone. It was not cruelty. It was divine law being established. The most shameful crime happened in Shittim, Numbers 25. One records that the people started to fornicate with the daughters of Moab. It was not just illicit sex. The Moabite women invited the Israelites to the sacrifices of their gods. An Israelite had the audacity to bring a Midianite woman into the camp before the eyes of Moses and all the congregation. Phinehas, grandson of Aaron, did not hesitate. Numbers 25, 7 to 8 tells that he took a spear in his hand and went after the man of Israel into the tent and pierced them both. The plague that had started because of immorality stopped immediately, but it had already killed 24,000 people. There were also the fiery serpents of Numbers 21. The people murmured against God and against Moses. "Now why did you bring us up from Egypt so that we die in this desert?" God sent poisonous serpents that bit and killed. The solution was strange. Moses made a bronze serpent and put it on a pole. Whoever was bitten and looked at the bronze serpent lived 40 years of rebellions, punishments, and death. But there was a purpose behind so much severity, and that purpose was about to be revealed in the most radical transformation in history. All the adults had to die in the desert. Numbers 14. 29 records the harshest sentence of the Bible. In this desert, your bodies shall fall all the number of those who were counted among you from 20 years up, who have murmured against me. It was a collective condemnation. It did not matter if you were good or bad, faithful or rebellious. If you were more than 20 years old when you left Egypt, you would die walking through the desert. Only Joshua and Caleb were spared. Why? Because an entire generation of slaves could not conquer the promised land. Numbers 13:33 shows the defeatist mentality. When the spies returned from Canaan, they said, "Which we also saw giants there, and we were in our own sight like grasshoppers." They had seen God open the Red Sea. They had eaten manna for months. They had drunk water that gushed from the rock. But when the time came to trust God for the conquest, they chose fear. Deuteronomy 2. 14-15 summarizes the result. And the days that we walked from Kadesh Barnea until when we passed the brook Zered were 38 years until all the generation of the men of war was consumed from the middle of the camp, as the Lord had sworn to them, 38 years for an entire generation to die. Numbers 26, 64-65 confirms that at the end of the journey among these there was none of those counted by Moses and Aaron, the priest, when they counted the children of Israel in the desert of Sinai. It was a walking cemetery. Each year that passed, more graves were left behind in the desert. Fathers died seeing the children grow up. Grandparents died without knowing the grandchildren who would be born in Canaan. But something extraordinary happened during these 40 years. The new generation that grew up in the desert was completely different. They had never been slaves. Never had they bowed before Egyptian taskmasters. They knew only freedom, the law of God and military discipline. When the time came to conquer Canaan, this new generation was ready. Joshua 1:16 records their response when Joshua assumed the leadership. "We will do all things that you have commanded us, and we will go wherever you send us." The transformation was complete. Fearful slaves became brave warriors. A disorganized crowd became an efficient military machine. 40 years of discipline in the desert had forged a conquering nation. The last leaders of the ancient generation died at the end of the journey. Numbers 20 records the death of Miriam in Kadesh. Numbers 20:28 tells that Aaron died on Mount Hor at 123 years. Deuteronomy 34:7 says that Moses died at 120 years. And his eyes were never dimmed, nor did he lose his vigor. Moses saw the promised land from Mount Nebo, but he could not enter. His mission was to free Israel from Egypt and transform them into a nation. Mission accomplished. Deuteronomy 34:10 closes the story with an impressive declaration. "And never again has there arisen a prophet in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face." And if those punishments in the desert seemed impressive to you, wait until you discover what happened with the most wicked cities of the Bible. So, click here on the screen to see the most sinful cities of the Bible, places that made God repent of creation